Welcome to The Rewind, an R News monthly podcast
where we discuss various different topics in the Bahamian society.
I'm your host, Jasmine Lundy.
I'm your co-host, Jhanae.
I don't like eggs enough.
I get the vibes.
Right, let's put that on a shirt.
By our last name.
Yeah.
This is The Rewind. Welcome to The Rewind. Woo! So this is the kind of show where we'll be talking about important topics within our community in a fun and engaging and youthful way. So welcome. This is episode 6 and we're still going to be talking about the orange economy. If you haven't checked out episode 5, you should definitely go and check that episode first and then come back here because it's all connected, just like art. So I am your host, Jasmine Lundy, and with me I also have my host, Jhanae Winter. And then if you've noticed that someone is missing, that's because one of our guests, Jodi Minnis, she had to tend to other duties, but we thank her so much for being on the show. And right now we have John Cox, who is, let me get this right, the Executive Director of Arts and Culture. That's a big title,
At Bahama.
Okay, at Bahama, yes. So let's talk about the orange economy.
Okay, well, before we get into that, I kind of want to do a little hot seat. Nothing too much, just a little pressure though. So my first question I have for you, John, is, well, in your opinion, is the digital age changing the way we view and appreciate art?
Absolutely, yes.
You want to go into that just a little bit, just briefly?
Why do you think so? Yes or no? Yes, because it calls into question the idea of authenticity and ownership, and just the boundaries around which those divisions are policed. And also it kind of critiques in a way what the value system is of the experiencer.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my second question is, should the government fund art, or should it be just solely left up to private funding?
No, I think that the government should definitely create policy that enables the development of a more level playing field for personal practice, for commercial galleries, for museum platforms, and the list goes on and on. I think government should not be it shouldn't be subsidized by government 100%, but certainly there should be some incentives given for people to be able to go into these fields and to support platforms that will make the chances of their sustainability greater.
Okay.
That's actually something that we'll be touching on a little bit later because the Davis administration actually has some goals specifically for the orange economy, and it's a laundry list of things, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. But we also want to touch on education. Oh, no. Yeah. Well, we're educating ourselves first.
And the audience.
Right. And we want to touch on intellectual property because it's a bit broad. There's a lot of things to cover under intellectual property. So we want you to please, let us know and our audience know what is intellectual property and break it down for us.
And how does it, relate to the orange economy specifically?
Right. So intellectual property as a topic is, I should just lead with that is a pretty heavy topic, right? Okay. So I think the most simple, high-level way to describe it is the property of ideas, creations, inventions, symbols, artwork, songs. It is everything that embodies the completeness of those things that I mentioned, as well as the processes and the methods and the formulas that go into achieving those things. And so somebody's intellectual property would be the property of their creativity, right? Which is particular to you, to me, to somebody on the street. So I know for most people they go, well, why is that even important? Why do we need to think about, my creative process versus your creative process? Because it is connected to a whole system of how things get built out. In some cases, people say, well, what's the difference? I had an idea, it didn't really amount to anything. It's not valuable. And some other people have an idea that could be the simplest idea in the world that somehow somebody hears and says, oh, I like that idea. I'm going to do that. And there's certain things along the kind of linear process. Like I like to think about things in metaphors, right? So if you think about like the whole creative process is like a string that has one end to another end. And one might just be the kind of flickering of the idea that comes to you in the night that is for you to write a song or to come up with a beat or to make a painting or to design how to stitch a pillowcase together, all the way to the actualization of that thing. There's that kind of process and how that string relates to the environment that it's in. There are points at which the content of that string becomes quite vulnerable to it being taken away, or even what you're pulling into the string. You know, so it's a little bit of a it's definitely it's a knife that's all blade, right? So it's sharp on both sides. So you have to be very, very careful with how you are negotiating your intellectual property, because it can help you and defend you and support you and be, you know, it's your right. But it's also sometimes people don't recognize what they're doing in their creative process. Like they're taking things, borrowing things that they don't necessarily know that they have the right to borrow.
How can an artist, you know, you talk about the process and everything, how can an artist possibly trademark their work? Is that the right term?
That is the right term,
okay.
yeah. So basically with IP, there's a couple of categories, right?
Okay.
So you have trademark, you have patent, you have copyright, and then you also have trade secrets.
Right.
So all of those things. So this is all of this is quite legal, right? And so I think for a lot of creatives, you know, for us, people think that, you know, creatives are the opposite of wanting to be technical and administrative. They just want to be in this emotional state of creativity. But I think when you have to become an arts administrator, somebody who runs a gallery, somebody who's an agent for an artist, somebody who runs a museum, doing retail, producer, all kinds of different things in all different fields, you have to start thinking about it. So your question was, how does somebody trademark something? It's a legal process.
Okay.
So you have to engage a lawyer, and you have to, and that lawyer is going to sit with you and come up with the best terms to describe what it is you're actually trademarking. Okay. Right. So normally a trademark will be about, it's something that's concrete. It's a symbol. I trademarked the Coca-Cola logo. I trademarked the Nike tick. I trademarked, you know, I'm saying the Echo logo, right? The logo for the current. It means it's nobody else could use my logo and say, oh, there's another current, just happens to be the same colorway and same everything else and font that everyone else is using. So you have to describe in the best way you can to your lawyer what it is that you're trademarking, and express the concerns or the reasons that you're doing it. And then he or she as a lawyer then has to document all of that. And that process has to go as far as to like the Attorney General's office, because it needs to be registered, right? So it is not, I think oftentimes people think about intellectual property and rights as things to do with like you and I, right? It really goes beyond that, right? Because these things are binding beyond you and I. Other people can kind of come into the fray and really confuse things, you know? And so, your first question, I don't mean to come off of that, but one of the questions was about like the digital world and how the digital world influences things, how everything is so accessible digitally. That's a major thing, right? So you have the access that people have to your work digitally that wasn't there before, right? I mean, I heard something staggering recently that in the last year, there was more content created than in the history of the content being created in the history of the world.
Wow.
And it's because of the digital platforms. Like, how many pictures do you take? How many, you take 50 pictures to get one picture that you want, and the content exists. You do all of these things. You read it 3 times to get it once. Everything is out there. Because Now the digital platforms enables it makes it easy and accessible for almost anybody to do things. You know, like in the photography world in particular, I hear this all the time. Photographers who, you know, worked decades ago will say it's so difficult now because the phones have such good cameras
Right.
that it makes everybody a photographer.
Right.
And so that their industry is actually hurt by that because people don't like value, like I'm an actual photographer. I understand the darkroom, I understand composition, I understand all of these other things because everything's in the phone and you could just take a beautiful photograph with your iPhone, whatever it is that you have.
And then that's the narrative people are pushing nowadays. Like even on social media, like you don't need like a cinematic camera, you know,
Right.
just take it with your phone and then edit it. Type
Right.
of thing.
And as it relates to IP, it's these are your ideas, right? You know, if I have an idea that I think it's a good idea for somebody to run and do a backflip into a wall of fire and land in a pool of water and, you know, at this point in time in this particular place in this particular blouse and whatever, these are all your kind of creative ideas. And somebody goes, oh, that sounds great. I'm going to do that same thing. And they go ahead and do it
Wow.
and start capitalizing on it.
That's
And then you go
crazy.
like, whoa, what was that? And so, you know, the person who did it in the first place, you
Now
go,
it's
well,
like-
did you actually, did you copyright that,
Right.
that set of ideas?
That's the
Listen,
thing.
we see that very same thing unfolding every day on a very popular app. Can I say it? Can I say it?
I guess.
TikTok. Everyone what TikTok is like you basically copy
Yeah.
whatever is in style. And a lot of people, for example, like choreographers, they kind of got upset because they would create this type of viral dance choreography and then it's ending up in video games where they're making money,
Right.
but the artists themselves aren't making money.
Right. So how does this translate, or what do you see maybe the struggle with Bahamian artists now? Is there any issues in terms of trademarking or, you know, replicating work? Like what's the issue there? Is it education?
I think it's a lot of things, right? I
Okay.
mean, geez, I wish I could make this more simple, but it really is not. I think in principle, it's simple to understand what intellectual property is, because you could understand what it is and don't do anything, but you understand that your work, your combination of your creative ideas are yours,
Right.
maybe. Because you probably were influenced by something else, and you might have brought something into your own work and said, "Oh, I'm going to do this." So I saw this table. I think I'm going to make one just like it. And then you know you may go out and do it before the person who actually before your inspiration does. So understanding what it is just that your creative ideas, processes, methods, objects are yours, right? Getting your work trademarked is not necessarily a difficult thing.
Okay.
In the sense, I'm not saying that you could snap your fingers and do it, but you can do it, right? But you have to balance whether or not you think it's worth it to do it. Like, why are you doing it? Like, so if
Okay.
you're going to trademark,
Okay.
you're going to start a new restaurant and you come up with a new logo and then you have a new recipe to cook fish a certain way and you want that thing to be your thing, you should trademark that because people can come along and take advantage of that. But like I said before, you have to be very conscious of what it is that you are absorbing into your process and what you're trademarking so you can protect yourself moving forward. Some people think, well, you know, by having something copywritten and somebody is aware that it's copywritten, like let me give you an example. So like we're sitting amongst a bunch of paintings. Let's just use painting as an example. Let's narrow it down. Paintings are a good example because they're tangible.
Right.
For the most part, they're tangible, right? So you buy an object, that's the painting. You gave me $100, I give them the painting, so on and so forth. Most things are transactional, and most business people, as it relates to creative processes, are just interested. Oh, I made a painting, you gave me $100. Thank you for the paint. Thank you for the money. Here's the painting. Beyond that, then somebody goes, oh, I really think this painting would look cool if this was on a T-shirt.
Okay.
Oh, I think we're gonna print these T-shirts.
Wow.
I'm going to print these T-shirts and I'm just going to give them to my family because it's a family reunion. I'm just going to give them away. I'm not going to make any money. Even that is problematic
Wow.
because you don't have the rights to do that.
Right.
And those transactions, if you were to sell your painting to me and we did not discuss it, the copyright is yours. I could not legally go and take your painting and then make postcards of it and sell them in a store in New York City. I'd be breaching the copyright because I didn't get permission from you to do it. So in giving somebody the copyright, it doesn't mean that you're signing everything over to them. It could mean that. Oh, I'm going to give you 100% rights to do whatever you want to do, right? You can make bed sheets and lamps and light switch, all kinds of things, right? And a lot of artists don't want their artwork represented that way. Right? They want some control. So there are ways, as what we call limited license agreements. So you can give somebody the right to do X amount of things, right? But you can do ABC, but not XYZ.
Okay.
You can limit it to say, okay, well, you can do ABC for 5 years, and then after 5 years, you have to stop. You could say, you can do, like, I could give you like specific examples where there's no resale. Like, so when we were curating this property, right, we have 2,400 rooms on this property, and about 80% of the rooms, we curated all of the work on the inside of the rooms is Bahamian art, but most of it is reproduction. So when we went to the artists, we got limited license agreements with them, and we said, okay, I want the right to reproduce your work X amount of times in these rooms. And the terms basically express that, yeah, you can do that, that's okay, but also it's not okay for you to you can only do it this amount of times, a finite amount of times in a room this way. But the agreement also says that I would like it if you would not take the same work and do it in another
Kind of format.
in another hotel somewhere else, so your hotel looks like my hotel.
Right.
So it's like on both sides of the agreement, right? So it's like you have to come, and this is where it gets convoluted. It becomes usually pretty meaty contracts, legal contracts that kind of specify all of the details. And then the next thing is, I just want to compensate for that. If I look at this painting and I say, okay, I'll sell you the painting, but if you just want the object and I have all the rights, you get to buy it for $100. But if you're so-and-so company, and I think that you're likely to do something with the painting and you're probably going to make $1 million on it, then you need to pay me more because you're getting the rights with the object itself.
Exactly.
And sometimes people get the rights and not the object. They say, I don't want the actual painting. I just want the rights to reproduce it. So then the object lives by itself in another kind of sphere.
Okay.
Oh, it's a beautiful thing, but you can only experience it if you're actually underneath it. No picture, no nothing can be taken of it legally. So I know that's super complicated, but it's something that's important because what ends up happening is you can then robustly frame your company, frame your concepts that develop your brand or whatever in a way that they're protected. So if somebody were to breach it, you could actually go after them legally. Okay. You can say, well, hey, how come I noticed that my design is now in your restaurant? Like, when did you get permission to do that? And clearly this is my design. Right. You need to protect yourself with those types of things. And so, it's quite complicated, but it is something that we have to understand because we're talking about the orange economy and, it does relate to that because it makes people's creative processes more robust, right? So they're more protected in that sense, but it is very complicated. I mean, I've dealt with it on so many different levels where you have to be careful that you have the right to actually sell somebody rights. Because you may say, oh, hey, look at my painting. It's my painting. And it may have the same exact composition and color of another painting. And you say, oh, I'm going to give you the rights to do this thing. And someone goes, well, this looks a lot like this other painting. Like, did you get rights transferred from that painting to you for you to then want to establish the rights to give to me? Because it gets complicated because people can come after you. And I think, we are in a community that is quite small, and also where this way of thinking is still quite new. So, I mean, I experienced it. That's why when we were coming in, we were talking about this, I, wanted to wear my executive director hat because this is where I experience it. But it affects everything. There's a lot of other things that kind of go on with my creative process that I've seen. I've seen other things happen. I've seen inadvertent things happen where the artist is not even realizing that they're breaching something and they do something.
So do you think, because I know I reached out to, I can't remember what the art class was, but I reached out to somebody because interested once again in art class, and he told me something along the lines of, many behemoths don't want to teach because they don't want other persons taking their techniques. So do you think, I don't know if it applies, but do you think maybe the process and all that goes into it maybe is hindering bohemians or bohemian artists in any way?
Yes, I do think so. I think I think you can be your creative process can be prohibited because you're too cautious you're too
all
protective,
the legal work
right? So I think in some cases, I know, I'll just use myself as an example because I think that's probably the safest thing to do. Oftentimes people say, oh, your work is everywhere. How come you allow this to do? Because I also recognize that there's a value in the exposure of the work. Sometimes you have to recognize that monetary return is only so much.
Okay.
But the exposure of the work, if somebody says, oh, I really would love to be able to use the work, but I don't have enough money to pay for rights for all of these things, but I would like it to be in this thing. Sometimes you can negotiate other things like acknowledgement. You could just say, well, I like the work. I like whatever publication you create or whatever it is you're doing for the work to be acknowledged as mine. Or, or sometimes you don't have those things, but you really feel like, well, if you feel that there's a project that is going to catapult your creative ideas into a sphere that you might not be able to do on your own, you have to think about it. I had this kind of little saying that people used to say a lot when I was in art school. They said, chess is not checkers, right? And yeah, sometimes you need to be thinking about okay, in some instances, maybe it is. Sometimes in order to get your work out there, to get it elevated, you need to give it away for it to become valuable later. So sometimes you go well, I'm going to calculatedly say, okay, well, yes, you can use these things. But be mindful with how you negotiate the terms, because it's not all monetary. Right? I think everybody thinks, oh, you're going to get sued or someone's going to come after you. And a lot of times people don't sue people that don't have money. Right, it's not worth it. It's actually quite expensive to hire a lawyer to go through all that process to sue somebody who really isn't going to be able to pay you back, right? I mean, oftentimes what it is people want they put provisions in place to stop the further use of the work. It's not really so much about money. They say, well, can you please stop using a cease and desist? This is my painting. Why is this on your commercial? And you didn't get permission to do it. You didn't pay for it. Please stop it. Please take the commercial down. And in some instances, I think it's a case by case. You really just need to be thinking about it. But it is complicated, and especially with music. I mean, you guys are generationally, I'm kind of dating myself, but I remember it's a big old thing, how people access music.
Yes,
I mean, in my days,
so
people would
easy.
go to the store like idiots and spend money on some record and say, oh, look at this, the record. I just spent $15 for this thing. And now digitally you can get music anywhere. If you get it, you could figure a way that you could just share with all of your friends, and you probably didn't even get it. And it's a funny value system that we're kind of working within. I think music is a really unique one because music is non-tangible, but it's also it's sensory in the sense that it's purely listening, right? And so the digital platform can capture that audio in a way that now the audio devices are so smart, it's almost impossible to block it. You know what I mean? And so I think a lot of musicians just said, well, geez, we can't even fight this. I remember there's a band, I don't know if you guys heard, it's a band from the UK called Radiohead.
I've heard of them before.
So Radiohead, I think, had an album that came out several years ago, and it was in the midst of this like people downloading and not paying for music and whatever, and they just made the album free. They said, this is free, you don't have to pay for it, but if you want to pay for it, this is how you pay for it. And people paid for it because some people said, you know what, this is your art and I actually should pay for it.
Right.
It seems like overall, what we really need is education about this vast industry, right?
Agreed.
And I know, for example, the government, they have some initiatives targeted at the education, realm or whatever. So, for example, one of their initiatives was to establish a tertiary school of visual, performing, and recording arts in public-private partnership. And I think it's a good idea, but at the end of the day, my concern is, are you teaching students how to protect their work? Because, for example, Jhanae and I was talking about this when we were planning this episode, and we found so many terms and stuff that we weren't really familiar with, even as media journalism majors. And we're like, why didn't we know this? We should have learned this in school. Especially if you're teaching creative things in school, like dance, you're teaching art, you're teaching music. Why don't we know how to protect these things from when we are taught
At
about
least have a
these
class
things?
to expose them.
Yeah.
Right.
Education is pivotal,
Right.
in all of this, because I think the creative processes are often thought about purely in the kind of studio kind of concept, right? So it's like you're thinking about the making.
Right.
Or somebody needs to teach me how to be a better painter, how to sing a better song, how to play the bass, or how to, dance a particular way. But the professional practice is something that has always been missing. And usually people in the creative fields learn it the hard way, right? So business administration that people do, other industries, the industries are more established, right? I have lots of friends who are lawyers, people who are accountants and doctors and so on and so forth. Their industries are a lot more framed up in a way that there's huge amount of policy, there's industry standards, so you get a sense of it. Like, well, how much typically does a lawyer charge? You have a sense of it. Like, oh yeah, well, because there's the bar association, and that. In the creative field, from a professional context, there hasn't been, those bodies don't exist. So there's not like an association of professional painters that would say, hey, this is kind of like a normal pay bracket that you should anticipate. Oh, I graduated from school, I have my master's degree, I've been painting for 5 years, I have this gallery representing me. My work on average is probably going to be around this amount of money, right? This is what it's kind of worth, based on a certain set of conditions and experiences that one might have had. But I think the initiative that the government has to set up this institution is a good one, but I think that the level of, or the scope of courses that are offered really need to go into a space that has been, for the most part, like uncharted territory. Because I used to be a faculty member at the College of the Bahamas for quite a while, for more than a decade, from like the 90s into the early 2000s. And then I worked at the National Art Gallery for several years before I came here. And I have my practice, and I had another kind of art compound for about 2 decades in Chippenham, where we had a lot of different practitioners working together. So just based on the raw experience and the memory of, oftentimes it's like conflicts. It's like, oh, this thing came off the rails. If we had done this, it would have been better. If we had a contract, it would have been better. And a lot of times artists are so don't want to deal with that stuff. It becomes like, oh, who wants to deal with this? Who wants a contract? Who wants to hire a lawyer to give me some 17-page thing about like what you can and can't do with my work? It becomes problematic. But this is where, or not problematic, but just sometimes inaccessible. People can't afford to do all of those things. But I think we are at a point where the industry is grown. The industry, this creative economy that we're talking about, the orange economy, where it beyond behooves us to be able to have these things in place. And really what is interesting about this is people who are in the legal field, who are in the finance field, who are in the marketing field, in the communications field, I think now recognize that this creative sphere is actually a sphere that their practice can live in. So like if I'm a lawyer and I really just want to practice IP law within the creative industry, it's a way that you can almost like reinvent your practice in this creative sphere. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's
Now it kind of like bridge the gap.
it bridges the gap, so
Right.
you're actually doing the work that helps prop up this part of the industry, which is huge. I mean, you know, I always use the example of like Art Basel Miami Beach. I don't know if you guys have heard of Art Basel. It's an art fair that takes place in Miami Beach. Art fairs are like big trade shows with galleries that they have them all over the place in North America, Europe, Asia, so on and so
Right.
forth. So you go to like a trade show where a gallery is representing X amount of artists, and the whole idea is to sell the artwork to different people.
Okay.
You're talking about IP and how important it is when you're in that platform. It is epic, right?
Wow.
To be able to understand what you're doing, even to engage the people who are administrating the art fairs is super, super important. To be able to understand, like, okay, they're asking me to promote my work or to promote my gallery this way. Is what they're asking me okay? Should I be following up with them to say, oh no, that's not okay, you can't do this? Because if you just come across as naive, they will
They'll take advantage.
150% advantage of you.
I can imagine.
You know, and so it's, you know, there's a balancing act. And I mentioned Art Basel because of the orange economy. That is a
Right.
massive injection into the GDP. It is massive, the amount of art that's sold, the insurance, the taxes, the food and beverage, the hotels, the transportation that's connected. That's all the pebble that drops in the water is the art. And the ripples are extraordinary that come because of the creative industry.
Wow.
So it becomes that moment where oftentimes I like to think about it like this. People think of as the art like seasoning the meat, right? I like to think about it as the art is the meat and the other things season the art.
Okay.
And I think that's, you know, it's like people say, yo, you buy a painting to match your couch. I think you should buy a couch to match your painting.
So I think we learned a lot today.
Yeah, very, very informative, very good stuff. Okay, guys, so in this segment, we wanted John and Jodi to kind of like, you know, give us their opinion of our work. So me and Jasmine, we brought a few pieces of what we painted or drew before, I should say. And, you know, we just wanted them to give us their feedback. That's what we're going to do right now. So let's get straight to that. Me and Jasmine brought up like just a little something, not too much. And we kind of like wanted to present it to you guys for you guys to see. So actually, I went to like launch event and Jodi was there as well, and I wanted to say hi, but I was like kind of scared because I'm like maybe she don't know who I am, and it would be weird. But I did this. It's the cam zooming in. Can you guys see? Okay, so this is what I did, and surprisingly, like I'll give it to you guys, but. You could actually pass this over, Jasmine. I'll talk about it. Surprisingly, like, as I was doing it, people were like, ooh and out. I'm like, because I kind of messed up a bit. But anyways. And then the vibe of the Petty in the Bag launch for John, who was in there. It was like this, like, turquoise, peachy. So I was kind of playing off of that, but the colors are a little bit darker. But, yeah. That's my first thing I have to show. So, like, what do you guys...
Tell us more. What are you looking at?
Well, this was during the time I was looking at a lot of inspo on TikTok, and like the first thing everybody does is like the gradient type of thing, and I'm like, okay, I don't really know how to freestyle or anything because I'm extremely new to anything relatively artistic. So I'm like, let me just try that, and then I just wanted to make it a little more interesting, so I did the little strokes. I don't know.
So I appreciate your repetition.
Yeah,
Use
that
of
was my
color
inspo.
is also very lovely.
You could be as real as you want, you know.
Yeah, going through the checklist.
Okay,
so
okay.
So whenever I look at because I was the adjudicator for the E. Clement Bethel National Arts Festival. So I look at things through the principles and elements of art and design, and that's the best way to engage from a judging perspective. Yeah, so I think you have a nice balance here, nice repetition, nice use of color. John, you want to help me out?
I do. I agree with you.
Why am I so nervous?
No, you shouldn't be nervous. You should not be nervous at all. But I think what Jodi is saying is there's like a formal way to look at things, like your composition and the color and your line quality and texture and value and all these other things, which I think help define the thing kind of like from like a competency perspective. Like, does it seem like it was competently made? You know, and I think based on what it looks like and the context that you made it in, it looks like it was. So that's cool. So I actually think I was looking at, and this makes me, this reminds me of, I'm doing another project that's work related. And I wish my colleague was here. There's a photographer called Spencer Tunick. Have you ever heard of him? Anyway, so he's this guy, I don't know where he's from. And he takes photographs of hundreds and hundreds of nude people, like in cities and stuff and on beaches and whatever from far away. So the bodies become
like one.
Yeah, singular thing.
Or they just you don't engage them close, right? So you don't know who the people are. Like they just become shapes. And there was a photograph that he took recently of a bunch of people standing on a beach, and they had these like sheer pink fabric things over the top of their head, and they just kind of pyramided down onto the ground, and there was like had to been hundreds of them on the beach, and you could barely see through that there was like a nude figure underneath the sheer fabric. And so when I first saw it, it made me feel like, oh, this is like a deep space, and these are figures of some sort or something like that going on. Yeah, that's what I think.
I get it.
Yeah, it makes me think of something else.
Yeah.
So this is cool.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I also have a painting here. It was done at a paint and sip. Nothing fancy. Alcohol was involved.
we love
so
paint and sip.
please take that into consideration. So it's very simple.
Nice.
I don't know if the camera could
Cool.
pick it up.
Oh, okay.
So the
know, I
trees,
can't
do you want to see it closer?
I tried to draw trees at one point. Like,
You want to see it
it
closer?
did not come up.
The trees were very deliberate because I am someone who loves nature. And I personally, whenever I get my own home, I want to have a garden where I actually like force plants to grow in a certain way. And so that was kind of like my vision for that.
Okay.
I love paint and sips because they remind me that I'm not a good painter. No, it's like really hard to follow those things.
Right.
So I feel like, and I absolutely cannot paint trees. So this is a job well done.
It's very symmetrical.
Yes.
Was that like you did that, or that's what they were after?
Well, I painted the tree myself with my
Okay.
own vision.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I really love like the brushwork
Yeah.
and your grass and then the leaves. It's pretty cool.
Yep. Did you have a good time doing it?
I did. I have a wonderful time.
I've
The
never been to a
gradient going
paint
on
and
as well.
Yeah.
At the top.
I like the symmetry. Like it's just odd to me that that wasn't a thing, and it's like everything that's on the right side is on the left side.
Yeah.
I don't think that was intentional.
But it looks neat. It looks intentional.
It looks very. It almost looks like
intentional.
a what do you call those
Yeah.
things? Rorschach test. Like when they make an ink
Yeah.
blot and they show
yeah.
it back to you, and you go like, "What do you see?"
Yeah.
And it's supposed to tell you about like what your preoccupations are.
So art school trick, if somebody asks us if what you did was intentional, you just say yeah.
Okay. Everything was so intentional.
Just say yeah.
I meant doing everything. Yeah.
It's cool.
That's cool. Thank you
Nice.
so much.
Okay. I guess I'll show. So
Thank you
like,
for being brave.
I was trying to get into. This is just like like when you go on YouTube and you just trace type of not trace, but like you just follow
follow.
what people. Yeah, that's kind of like what these. Where I was doing these with my niece, because she's into drawing as well. Oh wait, let me show the camera. Is it zooming in? Type of thing. Okay. So I'm gonna pass this on.
That's really nice.
It's also like, you just follow what they do and try to make it work. The one on the far left, I really was trying to practice with like the shadowing, and that was kind of difficult. I don't know why, but my niece was doing such a good job. She's 11. She's really into art. So doing this with her was also really fun.
Yeah.
She's always like, you want to draw something? I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I find a lot of kids that I talk to and they're like, oh, I like art, and you open a sketch pad, it looks just like this. Or like anime galore.
Yes.
Yeah.
Out there
What
the
is it
anime.
about anime?
I don't know. I love it too. So it's just something about it, man.
I had an anime phase as well.
I'm still in
I
mine.
did not.
I did.
I think I'm just too old.
Yeah,
You know,
sorry.
and anime existed
Maybe
when
you
I was
should, like,
young.
go back to it.
When I was young,
Something
I have a
animes.
daughter
I think
who
you have to
also
find the right one.
whose
Yeah.
sketchbook looks
Just like that.
similar,
Yeah.
similar but different. This is really nice.
I love the
It
gown. That's really nice.
The shading and the belt.
Yeah.
I also just like the idea that the figure, man, I'm just reading into it. Like I like the fact that the figure is not engaging you.
Mm.
You know,
I think that was the best one on that. Like the puff girl one, like we really
that this
struggled.
one?
Yeah, like trying to get the puff right, and like I was erasing
Puffs are never
the
right
lips
though.
because like this was my first time even trying to like draw a face. This is my first time doing anything, and I just was looking at the picture and was like, okay, let me see space wise, let me see how to do the brows and everything. And she was doing such a good job. She finished way before me. But it was really fun, and that's what I liked about it. And you guys touched about it in, you know, episode 5. You know, definitely go and check that out, guys. But you know, I love how it was just like free. I found myself trying to like restrict myself at first. I'm like, you know what, just do it. Like, just see, like, no competition. And
So
just
one
relax.
thing that I tell artists in studio visits is that all people look different to all of us. So how I draw a person is not gonna be how John draws a person, and so on and so forth. So I think sometimes when we sketch, we try to get the person
Perfect.
to look like a person so that someone else could think that it's a person. But I think we should just like lean into how we see people and just render it like that. So that's advice to any kids out there. Just draw the people how you see the people.
I love that.
and everybody should have these things full of drawings.
Yes, definitely.
Like good, bad, or different. It doesn't really matter. You always
I
like
need
look
to
back
get
at this
back
and
into
you
it.
just like, oh, this is what I should have because this is a relic of your thoughts. Just a journal, you know, in a way. So it's very cool to see this. Very cool.
And keep at it.
Yes. Okay, thank you so much, John and Jodi. I was a little nervous because, you know, they're experts. We don't know what they're going to say, but they wasn't too harsh. They were pretty good with us and definitely going to take that critique forward. So this has been episode 6. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you so much, John. We've learned so much about intellectual properties, copyright, trademark. I hope you guys are paying attention, especially if you are a part of the orange economy. This is some good stuff and you don't want to miss out. So definitely tune in to our other episodes. The playlist link will be in the description. This has been The Rewind with me, your host, Jhanae Winter and Jasmine Lundy. And we hope to see you next time. Thank you again, John, and goodbye. Now me fumbling the bag.